Hello, everyone. My name is Sophia, and I'm a Client Success Manager here at ClickUp. Thank you for everyone who has taken the time to attend the ClickUp for Engineering webinar. We have almost 200 participants so far, and the number is growing really rapidly, which is really exciting to see. I'm sure we'll have plenty of more attendees jumping in shortly. I would love to get a sense of where everyone is tuning in from. So if in the Zoom chat tab you want to give me a quick shout out, I'd love to say hello and see where you're tuning in from. It's always exciting for me to see people from all over the world coming to our webinars. So it's really great to see people from France, Colorado, Australia, Germany, Belgium, New Zealand. I think it's pretty late in New Zealand right now, especially. So it's really great to see where everyone is coming from. Just a couple of housekeeping notes before we get started with the webinar. So we do have some ClickUp support representatives in attendance who will be available to answer any questions you might have as I'm going through the content today. So if you have a question that comes up, please send it into the Zoom Q&A tab. That's where we're going to be moderating questions from. The Zoom chat tab is a great place to chat with one another internally, but we won't be monitoring questions from that tab. So be sure to send in your questions via the Q&A tab. This webinar will be recorded, so after it is over, the recording will be sent to you so you can watch it again or share it with others. And we'll also post it on our website at clickup.com/webinar. Lastly, I wanted to mention that I will be taking some questions live at the end. So in addition to the content I'll be covering, we'll be sure to leave some questions at the end pertaining to engineering use cases. Seeing some more people come from South Africa, the Netherlands, Russia, Brazil, Boston, Iran, Indonesia. So really exciting to see the UK, Italy, Portugal. So thank you so much for making the time to attend. So today during our webinar, I will of course be covering engineering workflows. We're going to start off by discussing how you can manage sprints in ClickUp, as well as backlog tasks and epics. I'll also be covering some automation tips so you can automate workflows and also work on tasks from multiple locations. We'll be discussing how to report effectively on your various sprints, and then finally ending with balancing workload based on time, sprint points, and more. So with that, we can actually jump into ClickUp. All right. So normally, if you've attended one of my webinars in the past, you'll know that I always like to start out by explaining at a high level how ClickUp is structured. So ClickUp at its core is rooted in a hierarchy structure, and the whole point of that is to make sure that every single team has a proper place to work, but it's also easy to reduce information silos so you can see what other people are working on and cross-collaborate as needed. Now, today I won't be getting as in-depth with setting up spaces hierarchically, but I wanted to give you a general sense of how I've structured things so it'll make more sense when we actually cover how to create sprints. So in my ClickUp workspace here, I've just created a couple of spaces. One is for my engineering team, and the other is for my product team. And this is fairly similar to how we at ClickUp actually manage all of our sprints and product releases. So if you've been with ClickUp for any length of time, you'll know that we release features very, very quickly, just about once a week. And the way that we have things broken up internally is our product team has a separate space where they can look at all of their feature-related tasks that they're working on or any bugs that they're working to address. But with our task in multiple list feature, which I'll be showing you how to use a little bit later, you're able to link tasks from the product side into one cohesive sprint list. Additionally, you can have a separate folder or space for bugs. So in this case, I just have a simple folder within the engineering space, which I've used to break up the different types of bugs that I'm working on. So either hotfix bugs reported to me by clients, internal bugs that my teammates have reported, or backlog tasks. So a really simple way to keep track of your backlog items in ClickUp is just via a simple list of tasks. In this case, my list lives inside of a folder, but you might even want to create a simple standalone list to manage your backlog tasks, which you can drop into a sprint later as needed. So let's actually speak about how you can get started enabling the sprint feature for your workspace. To get started, you'll go into your ClickApps settings area. And just note you'll need to be an admin in order to get started with this. ClickApps are customizable features which can be turned on or off. So normally when I'm working with maybe a marketing team or a content team, I'll start by keeping things simple and turn a lot of these different ClickApps off. But in the case of engineers, I'd encourage you to play around with these extensively because you're going to be using a lot of these features in your workflows. So some of the automations that or the ClickApps rather, that you'll want to have enabled for sure would be things like automation, dashboards. Also, you'll want to make sure that you turn on tasks in multiple lists, sprint points, and sprints. So let's actually start by delving into the sprints ClickApp. I'd recommend just turning on this feature for the spaces that need it. So for example, my human resources team is not going to use sprints. That's why I've only enabled it for a couple of these different spaces. And this is where you'll establish your sprint settings. Now, keep in mind when you apply the sprint settings, you'll only be able to do so once. That's because we want you to have standardized reporting. And if you're able to be very flexible with sprint durations and everything, it might really mess with your reports later. So you can customize your sprints at the folder level in the future, but just keep in mind your default settings will only be applied once. So first you'll want to set up your desired sprint duration. Some people might work in 1 to 2 week sprints, but you can change that however you like. And you may also want to turn on the option to automatically mark sprints as done when the end date elapses. And that will ensure that you don't have any random tasks that just don't get completed and fall off into the wilderness once your sprint ends. You'll be able to choose your sprint start date and also choose how you want to estimate your sprints. We recommend using our sprint points feature, but if you prefer to measure your sprints based on time or a numeric custom field, you do have those options as well. You can give your sprint a name as well. So keep in mind that it will always include an index number and then a start and an end date. And then lastly, just choose your desired date format. So before we leave this area, I want to mention one other thing about the sprints points ClickUp as well. So this is how we are going to estimate my sprints. If you want to have the option to add granular points per assignee, if you have multiple assignees in a task, you want to make sure to check this option off. Otherwise, you'll just be putting a general sprint point value for all of your tasks. And you can also choose to roll up subtask sprint points into the parent task. So if you use subtasks heavily, that would be a good one to add on so you can see the rolled up value for both subtasks and the parent tasks. So if we go back into our engineering space, you'll see that I've created a sprint folder to manage bi-weekly product releases that I'm going to be doing in my ClickUp workspace. Now, anytime you wanted to create a new sprint folder, you can always do so within the space here. And this is where you would be able to customize options a little bit. So if you wanted to have a different duration or change from the default settings you applied, that's how you would do that at the folder level. When you create a sprint folder, you'll also choose how many sprints you want to create up front. And actually, it would be good to show you once again just some of the other settings you'll be asked to apply. So there are some other, when you make a new sprint folder, you'll also be asked if you want to apply sprint automations. So for example, you can turn on create new sprints automatically, which will ensure that the next sprint is just automatically made for you in case you forget to manually create it. And the automation will always be based off of the current sprints index. You can also choose to automatically mark sprints as done once the end date elapses. And then finally, you can choose if you want to move unfinished tasks from the previous sprint into the next sprint. So these are just a few automations that can really help you speed up some of those previous manual processes you were using when managing your sprints. And the last step you'll see is I'll be asked to choose the dates for my first sprint. So whether I'm starting to work on it now or if I want to just plan out some future sprints, I can indicate that. And then also how many sprints I want to create up front. So let's explain how you'll actually determine which tasks should belong in a sprint and how you can achieve a similar effect to the one I have here, wherein teams have a separate space where they can work on tasks, but you also can tie them into your sprint with the task in multiple list feature. So within a task, you will actually see, if you open it up, the option to add it into multiple lists. So if I was working on this task on the product side and I decided this is one that I really need to drop into a sprint, I would be able to hover over the breadcrumbs in the upper left corner, and I can actually place it into my desired sprint. If you want to, you can actually apply due dates as well inside of the task to match the proper sprint start and end date up front. So this makes it easy for me to now see that task within my sprint area. I can even work on it from the sprint list, but I can jump back to see from the product side how they're managing the task, and I can collaborate on the task from two different areas. Another thing that I wanted to mention is that in addition to the list view that we have here, board views is an excellent way to achieve an agile workflow for your sprints. So this is a really easy way to see tasks arranged by statuses for all of your sprints. And you can even drag and drop them between different columns to change the status. You can also apply different groupings in a ClickUp board view. So if you wanted to group by assignee or by priority to see tasks in a different way, you always have that option. I'll be showing you several different task views today, which for those of you who might be a little newer to ClickUp, these are simply different ways of viewing your tasks. So thus far, we've just been in the Sprint 2 list, but I've been able to see tasks in both a board format and a list format. And the idea is, of course, just to give everyone flexibility in the way that they like to work and see tasks. Now, you'll also notice that for almost all of the tasks that are in this sprint list, I've added in point values. So here I can weight the task, which I'll be able to use later when balancing workload. I don't have that granular breakdown set up, but this will give me a nice point value for the entire task. And then we can see all of those points in my list view column. In addition to the task statuses that we just checked out in the board view, you'll also be able to set a status for your sprint. So these aren't customizable, but they're meant to just allow you to indicate if you've started a sprint, put it into progress, or completed it. keep in mind that you can't undo actions. So once a sprint is moved from one status to another, it's set in stone and can't be reverted. One other thing that we should chat about as well in regard to how you can determine which tasks should go into a sprint is, of course, automation. So I've shown you how you can manually move tasks or add tasks to multiple lists, but this is also something that you can do via automation. So automation in ClickUp can be set up at different levels of the hierarchy. For example, I can set up automation that is pertinent only to one particular list, but you can also set up automation at a higher level. So I can set automation for an entire folder or even for an entire space. So these are just triggers and actions that will help you to streamline your workflow a little bit better. Let's say, for example, in my bug queues folder, I wanted a way to really easily prioritize urgent priority bugs that are reported to me and get them into a sprint. So at the folder level here, I can set up an automation so that when a task is moved from any other priority to urgent priority, I'm going to add it to my sprint 1 list. So this will use that task in multiple list feature to just move it directly into the sprint so I can work on it. You can add various conditions as well. So if you wanted to have a certain condition that must be true in order for the trigger to prompt an action, that's definitely available as well. We have tons of different customizable automations that you can explore. And I also wanted to mention that we offer several automation integrations with platforms like Bugsnag and GitHub. So with the Bugsnag automation, you can easily monitor bugs and take action inside of ClickUp by automating your workflow with triggers and actions. So one example of this might be the trigger is if a project has a spike in errors, you would create a high priority task in ClickUp. You can also customize where and how the information appears in ClickUp by mapping your data from a Bugsnag trigger and relating it to a field in ClickUp. With the GitHub automation, you can automate your GitHub workflow within ClickUp and select from numerous GitHub triggers and actions, as well as map data for an extended workflow. So this is really helpful in easily managing code reviews, pull requests, and branches. For example, when a pull request is open in GitHub, you can automatically change the status in ClickUp to review requested or something similar. And if you're interested in testing out these automation integrations in more detail, we have some great docs to explain the process at docs.clickup.com. So I definitely recommend checking those out. Let's also go over shortly how to create an epic. So how we can break down large projects in ClickUp into smaller, more manageable pieces. This is a great way, of course, to link related tasks or what many of you might call stories together. So within my engineering space, I'm going to create a standalone list outside of my sprint folder here to manage my epic. And inside of the epic list, I can create an epic task to which I will anchor all of the other tasks that should belong to the epic. Now this task is going to stay out of my sprint, my actual sprint list. It's just going to be the anchor for the other tasks that should belong to the sprint. So from here, I can start creating the various tasks that I want to go into a given sprint. And using the multitask toolbar, I can actually select these tasks and link them back to my epic task to indicate a relationship between them. So I'm going to do so under the dependencies option, but in short, the multitask toolbar is a great way to take bulk actions of various types on your tasks. So With the dependencies option, I'm going to link to the Epic task. And then the other option would be actually if you had an existing sprint task that you wanted to link into the Epic, you could of course make that task also live inside of your Epic list as I showed you earlier. Finally, we'll use the task in multiple list feature to make the Epic tasks also live within the proper sprint list. So I would be able to come into my various tasks and drop the tasks into my desired sprint. So this is the perfect way to maintain a high-level overview of the essential tasks to your Epic while also continuing to work on them and monitor them from the sprint list perspective. Cool. Let's chat a little bit now regarding how you can report effectively on your various sprints. So at this point, I'm going to switch over into a different ClickUp workspace dashboard area. So for any of you who might be a little new to ClickUp, the dashboard area is definitely the best place to get that 500-foot holistic view of all of your projects without delving into the nitty-gritty tasks. So you can create various dashboards by team or project. In this case, I've just created a dashboard to take a look at my sprints. And within this dashboard, I can add various widgets to see my task data in different ways. So I'll go over a few of the different widgets I've set up here for you now. So up in the top left, we have a text block widget, and this is just a simple way to link in important tasks to your sprints, which you can monitor their progress, open them up. And you can even add in our / command to incorporate rich editing into the text block. This includes code block, so you can add in that directly into the widget in the dashboard. We also have a calculation widget, which is being used here to classify urgent bugs that I'm working on. So with this, you can find the sum, average, range, etc. of numeric fields that you've set up. In this case, I'm just doing a task count. And you'll also notice that you can filter this by location. So if you just wanted to filter to show tasks in one particular bug list or a whole space, you have that option. And choose also if you want to include archived or closed tasks and even tasks in multiple lists. So you can get quite specific about what exactly you want to see inside of the widget. And I've also added a filter in here to show only urgent tasks. So it just gives me a simple high-level overview of what I have going on. And then I have two other calculation widgets to keep track of the high priority bugs and bugs that I have resolved. In the burn up widget, we can track the amount of work done in a sprint. So here you can choose your desired source for the burn up chart. So either sprints, lists, or custom fields. And you'll also be able to select a range of time in which you want to track burn up. I'm also choosing to measure my amount of work based on tasks, but again, you could definitely do this with the sprint points feature as well. So I can easily track what was done and closed versus the scope. I do also like to utilize the task list widget for sprints because it's just a nice way to get a list view format within the dashboard so I can get a quick overview of tasks in the sprint that I'm working on. So I'd recommend filtering this particular list by location. So you could use it to focus in maybe only on the sprints you're working on for a given month, and then enable your desired columns to keep track of tasks assigned to a certain person or of a certain priority or due date. So it just gives you a nice quick overview of important tasks. With the cumulative flow widget, you can track the amount of work at each stage in your sprint. So it's a great way to gauge task status changes over time. And again, it's up to you what source you want to pull from within your sprints. So you can choose, in this case, I'm using the lists option, and I've also filtered for my desired range of time. And again, I'm choosing how I want to measure the amount of work that I've completed. So here I can get a nice overview of all of the tasks in each of the statuses within the locations I filtered for in this widget. The burn down widget will give you the amount of work left to do in a sprint. So this is another way to just track your rate toward completion over a specified range of time and see what was your projected rate of completion versus the target. Or active rather, sorry, versus the target. The pie chart is a nice simple one, which you can customize with any data. So in this one, I've just used it to give me a breakdown by assignee of how many tasks someone is working on. But this would be another instance where you could see how many points someone is allocated within a given sprint list. So you can gauge who has a lot of points on their plate versus those that have room to take on more work. And in the velocity chart, you can see the total amount of work done in 2 or more sprints over a given range of time. So this is a really great way to look back on your expected rate of completion for sprints and see what realistically was completed. So I can see on the average rate of completion, and then for over each week, I can see how many tasks were actually done within that time. Just a few other widgets to remark on. So first of all, we have our bar chart, which is just another customizable chart that you can utilize with any data. And this is a good one for those of you that might prefer to measure workload based on time rather than points. So here I have a time estimate breakdown by assignee so that I can see how much time each person is allocated and the statuses of all of the tasks that they are working on. So for each person, I can see the cumulative time estimated for their tasks and also what statuses all of their tasks are in at the moment. The time estimated widget is also a great way to visualize the cumulative time estimated for all of a person's tasks versus what they actually tracked in those tasks. And then finally, the time remaining needed to complete those tasks. And you'll notice if I click on someone's name, I'll see a drop down for all of the tasks that they are working on. Finally, I've added in a couple of chat widgets. So this is one more place in ClickUp, in addition to the task comment thread or chat view, where you can have a high-level conversation with your team specifically about sprints. So within a report, you can ping your teammate and send them a notification so they need to attend to whatever you're mentioning, or you can even mention a task or a doc that you've created in ClickUp that you want them to take a look at. So it's a great communication tool to utilize within the dashboard area. A couple of final widgets that you might want to explore are the cycle time and lead time widgets. So both of these are a great way to track the average time that it took for a task to be completed, either from when the date it was created or the date that it was moved into an active status. So in ClickUp, we have a not started status group, and if you are utilizing that, the cycle time widget would be a great one for you. It will just allow you to track cycle time for your tasks from the moment that it was activated to when it was closed. And then lead time is really just tracking from the very moment the task was created to when it was closed. So over time, you can track for sprints, what was the average time to completion from the moment you created that task. The last main thing that I wanted to cover today before we open it up for some questions is how to balance workload based on time, sprint points, and more. So actually one other ClickApp that I would recommend enabling if you do like to measure workload based on time is the time estimates ClickApp. And you'll notice that similarly to our sprint widget option, sprint point widget ClickApp option rather, you have the option to break down estimates per assignee. So in this case, I'll be able to set granular estimates per person. And if this was unchecked, it would just be one estimate for the entire task. And you can also choose if you want to show estimates in hours rather than days. The time estimates rollup will also allow you to roll up subtask time estimates with the parent task. And so similar to the sprint points, that might be a good one for many of you to enable. So if we open up a task, we can see that I've set up a point value for this task. But if I were to add in a couple of assignees here, we'll see, because I have that granular time estimates ClickUp turned on, I can set both a high level estimate for the whole task, but I can also set a granular breakdown by person. So it makes it easy for me to see how much work each person is responsible for in the task, and then a rolled up value for that at the top. The workload view is another task view, which is really great for resource management and capacity planning. So I've created this workload view at the folder level for all of my different sprint lists, but you can create a workload view that is only tied to one sprint list if you prefer to just track capacity for that particular sprint. So this view will show you all of the assigned tasks for each individual within a specified period of time. So I've turned on the 2-week option in the workload view because I am using 2-week sprints, but if you're just using a 1-week duration, you may want to switch that to 1 week. So over a rolling date period, I'm able to see how much work someone has on their plate. And there are 3 different ways that I can monitor workload within this view. So the first one would be based on points. So with this option, I can actually set a capacity for how many points someone can take on per week, or I can even get granular and say per day how many points someone should be able to take on. And then for each day, I can see how close this person is coming to hitting their capacity based on scheduled tasks. Now, you'll notice that first of all, on the weekends, we don't count capacity. And since this task has a 5-point value, the capacity is being broken up evenly between the task's start and end date. So once you determine who has capacity to take on more work, you'll also be able to drag and drop unscheduled tasks from your right sidebar onto their schedule so that they can allocate them to their schedule. The second way you can consider measuring workload is based on time. So if you're utilizing time estimates, again, you can set a capacity for how much someone can take on per week or even per day. And then you'll be able to see based on the estimates how close someone is to hitting their capacity, gauge who's being really overworked, and then redistribute tasks accordingly. You may want to consider measuring workload based on number of tasks, but for sprint management purposes, probably points and time are the best bets. By default, the workload view will be grouped by assignee, but you can also change this up. So for example, if you wanted to group by list so that you could see for each sprint the workload for the sprint. You can do that, or you could group by status, tags, or priority. The timeline view is actually one that our product team uses a lot, just to visualize all of their scheduled sprint tasks horizontally on a timeline. So in the timeline here, I have grouped by sprint, but just like in the workload view, you'll notice that you have other grouping options. So you could group by assignee to see what people are working on over a given span of time. But I personally, for the sprint management, really like the list grouping because it really makes it easy for me to see what's coming in the pipeline over the next couple of months. And I can also easily schedule out new tasks into my sprint as I have the bandwidth to do it. You can zoom out a little bit more in the timeline view than you can presently in the workload view. So if you wanted to see a whole month, you'd be able to do that. But we're working to add some more time range options for workload as well. So soon you'll be able to see monthly option and eventually quarterly and yearly. Lastly, the Gantt view is a great one to check out, especially if you utilize dependencies. So similarly to the timeline view, Gantt view is all about showing scheduled tasks on a timeline, but it's also definitely the best place to set and visualize dependencies. So in Gantt, if I wanted to make one task wait on or block another, I can actually just drag and drop this line to connect the two tasks. It looks like because it's a task in another list, that might not be as friendly for us, but let's say I'll add in a couple of more tasks here so we can see. So in the Gantt view, I can actually drag and drop the line to connect the two tasks. And we now see this dependency between them. You also have the option to reschedule dependent tasks from the Gantt view. So with this option turned on, if my dates get pushed back and I need to move things around a little bit, I can reschedule the dependent tasks all together and push them around. All right, so those were the main things that I wanted to cover today. I'll end with just a couple of things in the integrations area that I'd recommend checking out. So in addition to our automation integrations, you can also here check out our integrations with GitHub, Bitbucket, and GitLab. And we do also have API docs available for anyone that might want to build a custom integration. So that's something that I would definitely recommend exploring as well. All right, so with that, I'm gonna open it up with open it up to a few questions that came in through the Q&A tab. So I have a question from Zachary. When I add a task from another list into my sprint, it doesn't add them to the points total at the top of the sprint. In the example she just showed, it only shows one top point in the top bar. Yeah, that's an excellent point, Zachary. So that's actually a known issue that we're working to resolve right now. But what should be happening is because I have all of these sprint values for my tasks, I should see all of those rolled up at the top. And that's something that I've actually reported to the team. So it'll be resolved hopefully very soon, but thank you for pointing that out. Gabe, you ask, if I am estimating in hours, can I cap the number of hours that can be put into each sprint so that we don't overload it? So You can't do that presently, but that's definitely a great suggestion. That's also kind of what this point value is meant to do when it's working correctly. So the idea is that over time, you'll be able to see with your successfully completed sprints, how many points did I allocate to that sprint? And then when you're planning future sprints, you'll be able to gauge, oh, based on the previous successfully completed sprint, I shouldn't be adding, X amount of points. I should really lower it a little bit. But the time estimate piece is definitely a great suggestion. Gabe, you also asked, curious how ClickUp manages the grooming of stories pre-sprint start. So hopefully I'm understanding you correctly. Apologies if not, but I think what you mean is just how do you really determine which stories or tasks should really go into the sprint? And I mean, there are a few ways that we do that. We, as anyone who's used ClickUp knows, we rely heavily on customer feedback. So especially when we're prioritizing, quarterly releases, we will usually send out customer surveys to determine which features our clients most like to see. And very often those are the stories that will go into the sprint. We also always commit to prioritizing urgent bug fixes with every sprint. But that's something that I think we're still continuing to discuss and refine, and it kind of depends on our quarterly goals, what we'll determine will go into each sprint. Joshua, you ask, if I wanted to calculate the percentage done in a sprint and calculate the percentage of tasks done by my assignees to compare and track progress, can you do that? Yeah, so that would be something that you could do in a dashboard. So for example, if I make a new dashboard here for my sprints, I would be able to add in a portfolio widget to track high-level percentage of my tasks done in a sprint. So this is a really great way to link your sprint lists or folders from various locations into one view. So if I were to drop in a couple of different lists in here, there's a progress percentage component, so I can see for that whole list, how close am I to completing the task? And you may also want to play around with some customizable widgets in terms of seeing how many tasks someone has actually completed in a sprint. So for example, in a pie chart, I could show tasks done by assignee, and I could filter by a certain location and group by assignee, only showing tasks that are done or closed. And then I would be able to get a high-level breakdown of the percentage of tasks that are done or closed within that location by person. Sydney, you ask, what is the sprint retroactive widget? So I'm not entirely sure which one you are referring to. I believe I covered all of the sprint type widgets earlier today. If you didn't get the answer to your question though, we'd love to hear from you at help@clickup.com, and we'll be happy to look into that for you a little bit more. Yeah, I can go back to my dashboard just in case you wanted to take another look, but in the sprint dashboard I was showing earlier, I was demonstrating cumulative flow, burn up, burn down, velocity, that might be the one that you're looking at. It's the way to track average completion rate of tasks over a given period of time. So this will show the average number of tasks done, and then for each week I can see exactly how many tasks are completed. Oh, this one. So this is just another chat widget, which is it can be used to chat, you know, after the sprint's done, kind of like a post-mortem, chatting about what we did right, what we could have improved on. So just another place to have a conversation. Oren, you ask, how can I control the backlog position / order of tasks within the sprint? That's a good question. So one way to do that might be to create, to somehow sort by name or something. If you added in a naming convention to indicate the order that you wanted to sort them in, you'd be able to sort by name, which we can see. Used to be here. Maybe if I group by none, I will see it. Yeah, so if I have a big group of tasks, for example, in a backlog, and you had a standard naming convention, you could sort by name to maintain the order in that view. You could also sort by priority to keep, you know, tasks of a certain priority at the top. But again, that's something we can reflect a little bit more on. If you want to send us a support ticket, we'd be happy to look into that for you. Jerome, you ask, is it possible to take weekends into account in the target line in the burn down chart? Let's take a look. I think that the burn down chart should include weekends. I'll need to double check that though. I'm not sure if any of the customer support reps on the call know that off the top of their head, if the burn down chart includes weekends. But if not, that would be a good one to note down. Please, support team from Jerome to follow up once we find out the answer to that one. Michael, you ask, are formula fields reportable using / usable via dashboard widgets such as formulated dates, etc.? So this was actually a question that I got from another user as well this week, and it's not really possible at the moment to utilize the formula fields. The only way you might be able to do that would be in something like a task list widget. So let's test it out. Let's say I'm going to add in a formula fields for the bug queues folder. So if we make a task list widget based off of that location, let's see if the formula field will pop up. So yeah, it looks like the task list widget's probably the only place where you can visualize that formula field. Other than that, the formula field isn't really available at the moment. Carla, you ask, in a sprint, every task is a story, or is it just a task to complete a story? That kind of depends on your preference. I know some people most people that I know create tasks as stories, and then subtasks are the subcomponents of the stories. But in a few cases, I do know that people might use a list as a story with tasks as the components of the story. So kind of depends on the scope of what you're trying to work on, whether you just need a simple task to manage it or maybe an entire list. And then, yeah, just we'll take a couple more questions. So Joshua, you clarified your question a little bit from earlier. To be clear, I want to see the percentage of tasks done by assignee as compared to the percentage of tasks assigned to the same assignee. example, person X is 75% done with their assigned tasks for the sprint. The only way I found to do this was to have a linked list of tasks by assignee and use a portfolio widget, which seemed a bit roundabout. Yeah, that might be a little bit of a roundabout. The one other thing that I thought about in that case might be the completed widget. Let's see if this will show you how many remaining tasks this person has to get done within a linked location. Let me change this time range. Yeah, I can't honestly think of a way to do that in the reports at the moment in one single widget. It would likely involve creating a couple of different widgets, like for example, you know, 2 bar chart widgets, one of which shows all of the tasks assigned to a certain person in the sprint list, and then the second widget would be focused around done and completed tasks per person within the sprint. And just having those widgets side by side would probably be the best way to visualize that. Anthony, you ask, I've tried to create a dashboard widget that shows how much time a particular contractor has spent on a task, but the tasks we assign him are typically subtasks. Is there a way to get the parent task name into that list? Widget is a task list filtered by list and assignee and includes subtasks and show breadcrumbs are on. I'd probably recommend using one of our time tracking widgets. So for example, the time sheet is a good one to see within a specified range of time how much someone has tracked. So this should include subtasks, but just to double check, let me test this out. So we'll make a subtask here. I'm going to track a little bit of time in here. Okay, cool. So we will link the backlog list into our time sheet widget to see what that looks like. Yeah, so if you use the timesheet widget, that would be a good one because it'll show you both tasks and subtasks that the person has tracked in within a given range of time. Let me see in settings. I see. So if you click on, yeah, it will allow you to open it up so you can see the parent information, but it won't currently show in the actual timesheet widget. The last thing I'll check on this one would be if it shows in maybe a time tracked legacy report. And if I show subtask parent names, I think it should show up. Yeah, so the time track legacy report would be the best one for you to show those breadcrumbs by person. Carlo, you ask, I manage the epic story task hierarchy with a list epic containing task stories containing subtasks, which are tasks. If I manage a sprint with a list where I move the tasks after moving them, they are not in the original epic lists anymore. Would it be possible to make an automation that puts them back in the epic list at the end of the sprint? Yeah, that is possible. So you would be able to set something up so that, let's say in my sprint list here, I wanted to move a task back into the epic list at the end. I could set up a custom automation so that when status changes to closed, then I would move the task not add the task, move it into the Epic list. So that would be the way to do that one. I see, Anthony, you said the issue is that the parent task will typically have fixed problem X, but then create a number of subtasks that always have the same name. Yeah, we're happy to troubleshoot this more with you if you'd care to send us an email, but that's really the best reporting solutions I can think of at the moment. All right, well, I think we'll wrap it up on the questions. I think I took them all that were in the Q&A tab at the moment. But again, I want to thank everyone so much for taking the time to attend the webinar. I hope you learned a little bit of valuable information about sprints and epics and dashboards. If there's anything else we can help you with as you're playing around with these features, you can always contact our support team by clicking on the help button in your ClickUp workspace and connecting with us via chat. You can also send us an email to help@clickup.com. And if you're interested in checking out a future webinar, you can do so underneath the webinar tab here. This is where you'll also be able to find the recording of this webinar once it's posted. And again, it will also be sent to you once it has been processed. But thank you again so much, everyone, for your time. And we hope to see you again soon at a future webinar. Have a great day.